Hello everyone and welcome to this video. My name is John Alexander and today we're going to be talking about bonzai3d and Maxwell Render. What do we cover in the demonstration? Well, we'll take a look at how bonzai3d and Maxwell Render can be used together to create extremely high quality images. When we say quality images here, we're talking about very photorealistic images. With these two products combined, you'll be able to make renders that rival the best images that you've seen and been wowed by in product design or architectural 3D computer graphics magazines or forums. We'll show you some models built in bonzai3d and rendered in Maxwell Render, and we'll demonstrate how you can create photorealistic images as well. Well, what is bonzai3d? bonzai3d is one of our products here at Autodesk, and it's a 3D design modeling application for quickly creating 3D models of your ideas. Bonzai has a super easy to use interface with speedy drawing and reshaping tools so anyone can jump in and create their own models. Bonzai is used by architects, product designers, Hollywood art directors, basically anyone that needs to pre-visualize their work. The great thing about bonzai3d is that the models you make with it are CAD models, and they're suitable for export to CNC milling and rapid prototyping machines without any other 3D print prep software required. Bonzai also does NURBS, and this means that you can model organic shapes like Cirque du Soleil tents, boats, and even cars. You're not limited to square buildings. If you don't already own bonzai3d, you can download a trial version at bonzai3d.com. Sometimes clients simply want images instead of 3D models. For that, we can turn to Maxwell for rendering. What is Maxwell Render? Maxwell is a third-party rendering application for Mac and Windows like bonzai3d that you can purchase from NextLimit at nextlimit.com. They also have a demo version up there that you can download and give it a try. Maxwell and Bonzai make one of the best combos available out there because you've got an affordable 3D modeling application with powerful and easy to use modeling and texturing tools coupled with one of the most accurate rendering applications on the market. There's a fantastic new free video series for using Maxwell with bonzai3d at getmethod.com. Evan Truxell created these how-to videos that go into great detail and include subjects like downloading, installing, using materials, setting up the camera, you name it. Go watch these videos when you get a chance. We highly recommend them. They're very good. Evan also posts information about projects he's been a part of, other information, so it's all very interesting. You can spend quite a bit of time there at getmethod.com. If you have bonzai3d alone, you can already show off your models using many included display modes like hidden line, doodle, and two shaded real-time modes that support outlines and shadows and allow you to walk through and navigate around your models in 3 dimensions. These are very rapid ways of visualizing your models. If you want more realism, you can opt for rendering still images using plug-in renderers like RenderZone or Maxwell. RenderZone is a product offered by us here at Autodesk, and these are some images of projects rendered with RenderZone. RenderZone is a faster renderer than Maxwell. However, Maxwell has features that make the renders more realistic, so it can certainly be worth the extra rendering time. Maxwell does work a bit differently than RenderZone, and while both produce images, Maxwell does it by calculating through all the equations that describe actual light and takes no shortcuts. Those equations we hated in physics class are now helping us out as we create amazingly realistic images. The technical term for this is unbiased, and it means in a nutshell that your rendered image will be just like you went and took a picture of your model. Maxwell doesn't have a bunch of hard-to-understand controls like some of the other high-end rendering apps do, but you can easily match the quality of their images. If you can use a camera or can learn to use a camera or can learn what a couple of sliders do, then you can use Maxwell Render. With Maxwell, it always produces the correct render solution, so you focus not at all on the settings of how the rendering is made and strictly on creating an effective image. In other words, you'll spend a lot more time as an art director and less time as a rendering technician. bonzai3d and Maxwell together can help you unleash your creativity, as you will spend much less time with the very frustrating nitty-gritty stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and do some examples. Here we have several models made in Bonsai, and we want to take these and render them. Here's a file with some dice on a simple shelf, and here is a simple art exhibition room. When you have Bonsai installed, you'll see this icon that's been added up here to the rendering options. I'm going to go ahead and set up a key shortcut for my Maxwell Render options. I'll go ahead and choose Maxwell Render options and add the key shortcut Command M. I've done that already. One of the things I really like about Bonsai is the ability to right-click on any icon and set a shortcut for that tool. So it's very easy to set up key shortcuts in bonzai3d. Well, let's jump right to the meat of it here and click on the Maxwell Render button and see what we get. We get a progress bar up here in the upper left-hand corner where in the prompts palette, and we can see that it's translating the objects and the materials, and then Maxwell starts. And you can see that it starts out as a grainy image and then gets clearer and clearer the longer the render bakes or progresses. It's important to note that it doesn't really draw one line at a time down the screen, leaving you wondering what you have down here, if you may have left a texture in the wrong state and you don't find out about it until you're halfway done with the render, or draw in little boxes all over the render. It renders the whole thing right away, so you know if you've made a mistake right away and you can stop and restart it. It's actually launched itself in its own little process down here, which you can tell by the dock. Okay, now that that's launched, we want to go ahead and look at some of these options. There are 6 tabs up here across the top. I'm not going to talk about very much in these tabs because most of it you don't need to know, and you might want to look into it a little bit later when you get real good with Maxwell. But when you first start out, there's just a few critical things you want to look at. The first one is time here. This is set to 30 minutes by default, and as you can tell from my render, the longer I let it run, the better it's going to look. Now, some renders will obviously look really good sooner than others, but my philosophy is go ahead and set this all the way over to the right. I can stop the render anytime I want, so why limit myself? Sampling level is fine where it is. CPU thread's fine. Multi-light will come in the off position. Turn that over to intensity. This is a great feature that we're going to show you a little bit later on, where you can modify the intensities of the lights in your scene during the render or after the render is complete. So stay tuned for that. It's one of the most impressive features that Maxwell has. Under image, we're going to use PNG. That's lossless. That's fine. That's all we need there. Camera. This is the #1 slider in Maxwell that controls your render. It's actually labeled f-stop, and Maxwell uses the photography metaphor in order to set up its render settings. So if you are a photographer, you're going to know what this means right off. If not, you can go to a photography wiki, or you can go to any of the resources Evan Troxel mentions in his Using Bonsai with Maxwell video series over at getmethod.com. I'm going to give you my take on it, and you can basically use it to get started. If you move this over to the right, you're going to get a perfectly clear image. There won't be any depth of field effects. And depth of field is where maybe your subject is in focus in your image, but the foreground and the background are blurred. And if you move the slider over to the left, you can actually start to get some of those effects. So for test rendering, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it over here on the right. Now, shutter is the second slider here we're concerned with. It turns out this one is one that you can set later while the render is happening, so there's not a bunch of need to set this now. I'm going to show you a technique that's used because sometimes you'll need to do more than one render. We'll come into Maxwell and I'll show you here that you can change the shutter speed while it's rendering. If you look up here at the preview, you can see that as I adjust the slider, that brightness is changing there. And this allows me to determine, okay, my shutter speed should be 8. So when I launch the render again, unless I want to mess around with a slider again, I want to go back to my scene and change the shutter speed to 8 and save that in the file. So now this can be 8, and every time I launch, I will get the same result. File, nothing to worry about in there. Prefs, only thing to know about in here is this plugin manual. This plugin manual is great. It really goes into the stuff that you need to know for how Maxwell is going to interpret your bonsai materials and so forth. So this is a great manual. It's one you really need to read. You don't need to read it right away, but once you get started, it's something you want to go ahead and sit down and read. It's only about 40 pages long, it has lots of pictures, and it will fill you in on a great number of things. Okay, so that being said, let's look at a couple of other things that we can do. It turns out that while Maxwell is rendering, we can actually go ahead and work on our bonsai file while that's going on. So say, for example, I want to change the textures in here. So maybe I want to modify where these textures are on my object. Maybe I want to move the knot down a little bit here to the end of my a little bit down to the left from where it is. And the great thing about bonsai here is that you have this ability to control these textures in real time right on your object. So you know, if you want to make realistic renders, the best thing to do is start with photographs and create materials out of them, put them on your objects, and then move them into position. This is something that in other softwares can be a real nightmare. In bonsai, it's almost a joy to do it because you literally lay the images onto the faces and move them around. So I can work in my file while Maxwell's rendering. It also turns out I can go ahead and launch another Maxwell render. So let me go ahead and do that. Another Maxwell starts leaping in the duck. Those of you paying attention will see another one over here. That's a surprise. That's going to come later on, and I'll show you what that is there. Okay, so Maxwell now is rendering my second image, and I have a activity monitor that's full all the way to the brim. All my cores are rendering. It turns out that Maxwell will use all 8 of my cores for one image or divide them evenly between 2 images. So 2 images is going to take a little bit longer, but the important thing here is to know that Maxwell is very flexible. So let's just go ahead and stop this one. I only had that one there so that we could show it was rendering a separate image. And let's come in here and look at our image, how it's going so far. It looks like it's about done to me, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And then once I've stopped it, all I have to do is go ahead and choose Save Image, and I can save off my image and use it as I see fit. Something else we can do is go ahead and hit Render again, and it gives us the option, do we want to start it over again? Well, no, not really, but it's great that we can resume it. So what it's going to do is pick up the render where we left off and continue getting rid of the grain and making it sharper and sharper. So in this case, it's not a big deal. But if you had a big render that was going to take a couple of hours to do and you wanted to stop in the middle and do some other work, it's possible to actually stop Maxwell and start it up again working on the same render. So again, it's this flexibility that allows you to work very effectively and much more creatively. Let's go ahead and close these 2 examples and start to talk about rendering a bigger file and get more into how we're setting it up. This is the Sells Circus House. It was built in 1890 here in Columbus, during the 1890s here in Columbus, Ohio. It was built for a circus man named Sells, and it was designed by architect Frank Packard. Now, there's 2 main things to be concerned with whenever you're creating a rendering. One is, where is my light coming from? And 2 is, what do my materials look like? So what direction is my light coming from? And what's my building made out of? Is it made out of brick? Is it made out of stone? Does it have vinyl siding on it? Is the roof shingles? Is it terracotta? What is it? So we'll get a little bit into materials later, but first we're going to go ahead and talk about setting up lights. Okay, so I've got this view set up here. I'm going to back out a little bit so we can see it. And I've set it up to be just like I was across the street taking a picture. It's at eye level. It's pointed up at the building. So it's not way up in the sky. It's not some crane shot that's going to throw realism out the window right away. And I want my light to be in a specific location in this case. But I want to show you a little bit about these lights here. When you get Maxwell, you get 5 new light types. Some of these come with Bonsai, some of them come with Render Zone. But these bottom 5 come with Maxwell, and they're Softbox, IES, Skydome. These 3 we're not going to talk about. IES is notable because it allows you to input manufacturer data regarding your fixtures. So that is important if you are wanting to have very accurate representation of fixtures you're using. For example, if you make trade show booths, then you definitely want to be using this IES type light. Physical sky is your main go-to light. We're going to talk about IBL in a moment, but first we're going to stay with physical sky. Physical sky includes a sun. It has a power of 1. The power of the sun's always going to be the same. It's always been 1. It's 1 today, and it's always going to be 1 in the future. But you might say, hey, I know the sun's not always as bright on Earth as it is in space, and that's because it has to go through the atmosphere. Here under parameters are where you control the atmosphere. So this allows you to modify these values and create an atmosphere that will spread the light around, creating an all-around lighting. So it creates light like it's bouncing off the bottom of the clouds or off the earth, and creates this additional light effect. Since I don't understand any of that, I can use these predefined skies that other people have made using the sky presets that you can load in. Some of these come with Maxwell, so you can try it out. So there's lots of fun stuff to try out. Okay, so how do I locate my sun? Well, I have the option of doing so using this site and time dialog. I can choose to change my latitude, and I get this indicator of what my sun is doing. Or I can choose to do it by city, country, city. So there's this database in here that I can use to choose a city that my house is in or one that's nearby, and then choose a time so my sun will be very accurate. Since I'm not interested in doing a solar study here, I'm just going to go ahead and do this by origin and center of interest. And what this allows me to do is move my light around in my file. And because I'm in shaded full here, I can actually see where these shadows are falling in real time. So I want my light to be about 90 degrees to my camera or my view. And when I switch to my view, you can see that I can see these shadows here and what I'm going to get. So this is an exact representation of what I'm going to get when I render the image. Now we've got our sun, we've got our atmosphere. Atmosphere, while it provides this overall all-around lighting, actually does not create clouds. So if I want to have some clouds in my background, what I need to do is go ahead and use a different method to load patch in a background. So I've got this IBL type of light, and that stands for image-based lighting. And what that means is you can actually use images to light your scene rather than lights. And these images are called HDRIs. That stands for High Dynamic Range Image. And you don't need to remember that. What you need to remember is HDRI, because you can search on the internet and find all sorts of free HDRIs, and there are also professional grade HDRIs that cost a little bit of money to get. It turns out that Maxwell comes with some of these HDRIs for you to try out. Now there's two elements to an HDRI. One is that it has a panoramic image that can be wrapped around your entire scene and serve as a background no matter what direction you're looking from. And the other is that it has a lighting component. The light from this scene is saved in this file. And we can go ahead and use this Rad Sky 17. Now, I'm going to use it for background. I'm not going to use it for illumination. We could use it just for illumination, not have any lights in our scene, and get the exact lighting that was stored in this HDRI. I'm not going to do that for artistic reasons, and I'll show you why. I'm going to show you that resultant render in a moment. So this is a technology they use in Hollywood to record the light information while they're filming the actors on a set, and they can then use that HDRI to render CG elements or CG actors with the exact same lighting, and thus composite them together into the same plate, basically. So this is like a Hollywood technology that we can use from directly within Bonsai and Maxwell. I can also use it for reflection, so whatever's in my windows will be reflected. Refraction, if I'm looking through a window, I need that checked. So I've got everything checked but illumination there. And that's it for the lighting. So let's go ahead and see if we render this, what we will get. I'm going to start with the HDRI version. So here is one where I haven't set up any lights at all. I've loaded in an HDRI, downloaded from the internet, and I've simply rendered the image. And you can see that while I get a very, very realistic result, I don't have some of the things that might make the image more interesting, like the direct light, adding the shadows to the scene and so forth can make things more interesting. I also have a kind of a very even illumination all the way around. So it looks like a storm might be coming, or it's early morning. So this is nice and realistic, not what I want. So here's the image I just sent to render. So I have this differentiation between the value of these surfaces against those, and I have some hard shadows in my scene that add interest to my scene. Now you might be asking, okay, you said, okay, that was the lighting. Now what about the materials? Why does it look like it does? Well, it turns out that Maxwell will use your bonsai materials. So let's take a look at that real quick. If I go ahead and launch my material parameters, I see that I have a Maxwell material type in here. And what I have checked here right now is translate shaded. And what that means is that you can use these material libraries that come with Bonsai to put or define what your surfaces look like. So you get hundreds of textures that you can drop right onto your model and then render in Maxwell, and Maxwell will very faithfully render these materials directly on your objects. There is an option here for using what's called an MXM. This is short for a Maxwell material. Maxwell materials are incredibly realistic materials. There is a repository here online at the Maxwell Render Think Resources site, and you can see that there's some skies. We talked about those. You can load those in. HDRIs, we talked about those as well. Now we're going to talk a little bit about MXM materials. So these are materials you can download. They're incredibly realistic. So as you're creating a render, there's going to be a lot of surfaces that the bonsai materials can describe very well for you. There's going to be some materials that might be more critical to your image, and you might want to go ahead and use MXM for those. At this repository, you can simply type in the type of thing that you're looking for, and you'll get back all of the MXMs that apply to that. So this isn't just all the woods. There's 15 more pages of these. So you can see there's thousands of ready-made materials that you can go ahead and just use in your images. You can also modify these using the Maxwell Material Editor or create your own and upload them here. But if you're just getting started, you can download these and use them. So in this case, I've just elected to use this translate shaded to show you how far we can get before we even touch the Maxwell materials, just using the bonsai ones. One more thing I want to talk about in this file before we leave, and that is these bonsai trees. And these are components that come with bonsai, and they are here under the realistic trees category. They're billboard trees, and they can be used very quickly to fill out a background. And another trick I like to do is place trees sort of off camera in front of my light so that they actually add shadows to my foreground elements onto my house and in my street. So that's a trick I use a lot. If we go back here and look at the second image, you can see that I'm getting some of these interesting, more interesting shadows going on in my scene. Okay, so that's it for the Cells Circus House here. Let's move on and look at another example. This is Haus Schmar by Skogan Elam and Bray. This is prize-winning architecture that's outside Atlanta, Georgia. Now I've set up my lights in the very same way, actually, that I did for the circus house. I've got my sun over here 90 degrees to the camera coming down through the trees, which are going to cast dappled shadows into my living room down here. I've also got an IBL, so I've got an image base for the background, and so that's set up in exactly the same way. I've set up some additional lights in my scene. I've got these track lights here that I've added to my scene, and how I made them work was that I created this piece of flat geometry in here that will emit light. So I have this emitter material assigned to that little piece of geometry so that it will emit light. Now, emitters are something you can put on any object. So you can make a lightsaber if you want to, or have a glowing ball in your scene that floats around or just sends light out all over, whatever you want. So let's go ahead then and take a look at what's happening with the render. So here's the render. I've let it run all night, and I've come in the morning, and here's what I have. I've used all MXM materials for this one, and you can see it looks very realistic. So my MXM of the leather here actually comes with Maxwell, reads just like leather. Glass, of course, chrome, all that looks really great. Now the floor has this blurred specularity on it. The bump map's creating the grooves in my floor. It looks very, very nice. And for the ceiling, I have this material that creates these wonderful blurred reflections. And this is the way a lot of surfaces in real life are. So it's important to be able to render those like that so that you can have very realistic images. Okay, so now we want to go to the multi-light demo. And remember, we talked about this at the beginning. We turned on the intensity of the multi-light option, and that means that we can change the intensities of our lights while it's rendering or after the render. This, in fact, render is finished. It's not rendering now. But this is my daytime scene, and my client's coming in this afternoon, and maybe I want to show them a nighttime scene. So can I do that? Well, of course, it turns out you can, and I could do it without even re-rendering. If I look at my preview here, I can go ahead and slide this environment slider down to 0. I want it to be nighttime, so I don't want any sun or environment. And I also have these lights that I've added throughout the scene, so I can use these to basically season my scene by looking at it down here in the preview until I have exactly what I want. Once I think I do have what I want, all I need to do is hit the refresh button, and after just a second, Maxwell will go ahead and update my image. So this isn't a render that needs to happen. It's done. I can come up to File and choose Save Image, and I have my image. It's done. So I'm able to leverage the render I've done here by creating more renders out of it. And it turns out that this is pretty much infinite. Let's say looking at this glass material over here. Now that it's dark outside, I see the reflections of my objects in that glass. And of course, that's important for realism. What if I want to have some sensation of the sky and trees out there? Well, all I need to do is up the environment knob a little bit here and then click the refresh button again, and so that'll update. So now I'm actually getting like a late evening type image. It turns out that you can also use Maxwell to animate between these changes, so you can get these wonderful animations where the intensity of the lights is changing over time. And you can get that all out of one render. So it's a great, great tool that you can use for displaying your models as photographic, sort of finished animations with changing intensities in the light. That's it for our using Maxwell with bonzai3d demonstration. These are just a few of the features that you can use in bonzai3d and Maxwell Render. Stay tuned for future installments, and have a good day.